Shut up, Mokuba.
You know how to do Mokuba? This is how you do it. Mokuba is solid snake if you were a rich asshole. If you ask him, that's what he'll say. Screw the rules, I have money. A surveillance camera. That's it. He missed a big opportunity too, where like in the virtual world, the main character's name is Noah.
Ooh, I'm just saying, putting it out there.
The penalty is connection. I shouldn't be in it.
Can we do a bridge episode?
Is that cool?
Kind of.
Oh, you are a genius and a savior. Always me.
Turn to the side when you're drinking it.
Make it an advertisement.
This panel brought to you.
Okay, just to show them what to turn this on.
Another tape. Yeah, probably do a couple more. Make money. It wasn't that good. Just needs to be a bit more professional.
Using it the way it's intended to be used. I don't know what time it is. Are we starting? Or?
It's 15:15.
Yeah.
Sorry. So yeah, thank you guys for coming down here. It's really great. I'm amazed because where I come from, we don't have the color green. I had problems with Heathrow, but that's a story for another time. And thanks, by the way, for showing up at Brocon and coming out and supporting anime and gaming, and not going to see Batman instead. It's really flattering that you picked me over Batman.
Well, the cinemas were booked out.
If you guys liked Batman, I was like, is that just strictly an American thing? But apparently, you guys really like Batman. And I started thinking, like, do you guys have like a stereotypical like Irish superhero? Banshee. Really?
Black
Because
Cat.
you should. Think about it, like a really strong, badass Irish dude who just like kicks your ass. I would watch that. Garth Ennis, yeah. Okay, well no.
We should buy new lens for this.
I can't remember if I saw Preacher. I don't know if Cassidy was Irish.
It's okay.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. Oh, that blew me away because I started thinking of guys who should be like the prototypical. Yeah, I was like, okay, who would be like the best Irish superhero? And I was like, what about the crazy Irish motherfucker from Braveheart? He was really cool. They're my people. Oh, and then I was like, Lord of the Dance? He could kick.
Oh.
Michael Flatley, he kicks the shit out of you without moving his arm. That Irish step dancing was really something, wasn't it? When that was a fad, because like all of a sudden everyone wanted to do it, but no one wanted to watch it. Except you. It's really elaborate dancing, but you're never going to see one of those guys on So You Think You Can Dance, because they're like, can you cha-cha? And they're like, no. But anyway, D&D. Really, I'm amazed that Countermonkey turned out as well as it did, because I thought really that nobody wanted to listen to gaming stories. Because when I was at a game store, I never wanted to listen to game stories. Those guys were always hanging off the counter, was telling stories about World of Darkness. Where they're like, and then Mike Cadiff, he learned Quietus, and he was able to assassinate people. He assassinated Prince of Phoenix, and then Diablo him. And all of a sudden, I'm like third generation, so I'm basically an antediluvian. And then I talked to Kane, and I'm like, oh, really? No, you saw those stories, man. You heard, like, people ran these really out of control World of Darkness games. Those are the ones that really got crazy. But I don't know, how many of you guys actually have roleplayed, or do you like just listen to the stories? Wow. Oh, so you do play? Yeah. Wow, okay, so that's more than I thought, because really, back in the day, role-playing was like this, bad word to use, cult. Not really, but like it was the sort of thing you had to be invited to. Like it was really only a college thing where like, you know, if you lived in a dorm and you knew a guy and you were really bored and like he was a super nerd and he was like, do you want to play a game? This is before video games, really. Because this is like when the computer still had like these 5 1/4 inch floppy drives. So the games were like Ultima 3. That was like all you could play. So D&D was like this big thing, but you had to be kind of inducted into it or like introduced. So it was really, really weird. So how I got into it was my older brother got me into it. And it was at a way too young age. But like I was reading this stuff at recess. So it was That's my AD&D, which is probably what I was coming here to talk about, like old school stuff. AD&D was like this really strangely put together RPG. It's my favorite one, up against Pathfinder, the newest one. Have you ever seen Pathfinder?
Yeah.
Pathfinder's great. Pathfinder's tagline should be 3rd edition if 3rd edition didn't suck ass. Now, and this is where I'm going with this, is where AD&D was such a cool system, but even people who knew it were kind of, there was a lot of counterintuitive stuff to it, where like sometimes high numbers were good and sometimes low numbers were good. Like initiative, low numbers were really good, or THACO, or your THACO being lower was good, or your AC being 0 was better than 10. You'd think 10 would be high. And so like, even people who've been playing this forever, had to look it up. Like, which number is good? My saving throw is 17. Do I have to roll under that or what? It was one of those things. But like, what I really was thinking of talking about was the edition wars. Because when I was working at a game store, that was the big thing. Was 3rd edition was coming out, and 2nd edition AD&D was the standard for years. So I was one of those old people who, even back then I was like 16, I was one of those old people who was like sitting at the back of the store going, I need to change fucking anything. This game is great. And so there was a real schism here where like they were really trying to get new gamers in, because again, it was not newbie friendly, and 3rd edition really wasn't either. But there was like, I won't say bloodshed over this, but it was just about as close as you could get. And so 3rd edition, it sold like hotcakes, and nobody really liked it. Because its big problem was it didn't scale well, and there was a lot. In 3rd edition, they were like, high numbers are always good. So it just didn't scale where like, starting out it was really good, and then once you get past like 5th level, when you start getting into what's called prestige classes, you all probably went for prestige classes because you had to. And it was really weird decisions, because you almost never had an excuse to carry on with your basic class. You always promoted, one would assume, because you always got like levels in your whatever. But it was really strange. And so once you got to higher levels, it was this really strange thing where like your skills were getting to this ridiculous level. Your skills got to like plus 20. And so like you could do anything, like lock picking was a simple affair. And so it just kind of reached this thing where it was really uncinematic, where like, picking a lock should always be at least kind of a tense situation. But if you were level 10, you barely had to look at the thing. You just like glared at a lock and it would pop open. So that was where I really started not to like the game, was because everything was just an instant success. And a lot of people who stuck up for it were like, that's the way it should be. I'm level 10. I can do anything. I'm a badass, AD&D was like this, was this great game because it was unbalanced. And that sounds so weird, is because that's been the big struggle ever since AD&D, was to make a really balanced game. So balanced that no one class is stronger than another. And that's actually been the huge thing with 4th edition, was that when 4th edition came out, I liked it. Because the core classes as they were really smooth. Like there was nothing better than the other one. And later on I started to realize that's because they're all basically the same thing. Their roles are different, but there's no distinguishing a fighter from a mage, because they all have powers. And it doesn't make any sense. Like you have these cards that are like, you shift 3 spaces and you choose 2 targets in front of you and they're dazed for 1 round. And that's a fighter power. And it's called like kicking sand in their eyes and then spitting on them. And then you're like... And so the mage would do the same thing, and the mage would have an identical power where he'd shift 2 squares and then he'd throw blinding light at a guy. And so it was this really weird thing where you had these characters who all had cards to play. But AD&D was this great game because, for instance, if you played a wizard in AD&D like 2nd edition, you were screwed. Guess how many hit points you had?
4.
And that is if your DM was nice and lets you keep max hit points at 1st level. Mine did not. I had to roll a d4, so I had 2! And you didn't get constitution bonuses you didn't get hit point bonuses for high constitution. You got screwed both ways. So like a stiff wind would kill you. And this was also a case where if you got to 0 hit points, you weren't unconscious, you were dead. That was what killed 4th edition for me was you can't die in that game. You can't! There's no way. Because everyone gets a healing surge, and everyone has a power that stabilizes someone from from being unconscious. And if you're reduced to an absurd number of negative hit points, any healing that you get, even 1 point, takes you to 1 hit point. So like if you were like negative 29 on like fucking death's door, and somebody was like healing word, you were at 8. I'm like, Zah. So it's kind of this weird thing where like I'm not a killer DM, although all killer DMs say that, but you want to make it challenging. Like during a climactic fight, someone should go down. You know, so like it should be like some heroic sacrifice. Someone, you know, in this big like it can't like. My rule was always one person should go down in a campaign. Like the climactic battle should be that hard. And I played under a serious killer DM where every single encounter, at least one of us would die. And somehow I survived like a month. And that wasn't because I was good, it was just because I was lucky. But yeah, so again, that goes to balance, you know, balancing. 3rd edition's big thing was balancing encounters to where like everyone had a challenge rating and you had to build encounters around the challenge rating, and figuring that out was really kind of strange because all of a sudden you had these abstract numbers dealt to what roles they played. So like a challenge here, and then 4th edition completely screwed that up. Completely. Where like you have minions. You know what a minion is? Okay. Okay, yeah. That's it. A minion is a monster that looks like any other monster, but it has 1 hit point. Just 1, always. And this persists no matter what level you are. So like, let's say you're 17th level, you've been playing this forever, and like some evil lord is like, guards, get him! And like 20 guys come after you. And like it wouldn't be as elite guard, but these guards have 1 hit point, just 1. And like you mow them down, but that's their role. Is they're like they try to make it cinematic. How like, you know, if you're the Dread Pirate Roberts and you're trying to get to this guy, you know those other like 8 sons of bitches who like try to. He's like he's just like dismantling these dudes like he's Blade. They want it to look like that. That was the idea. Was like you're just chopping dudes apart. Here's the problem though. You never know in the game who's a minion and who's not. And here's where I got killed. I was playing in another Lord Cat's game, and I was like 2nd level, and he goes, you're escorting this car. This is the most stereotypical encounter in the world. You're guarding a caravan of carts when all of a sudden you hear some noises from the bushes, and all of a sudden a pack of goblins leap out. They shout a challenge and they charge you. That's like every game ever from 1st level. And, because it's a good encounter, you know, so you want to kind of warm people up to it. But this case, we're guarding this caravan, we're crossing a bridge, and these goblins pop out. And the goblin says, give us all your money or we'll kill you. So my character is like, ha 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 ha, you know nothing. You know, and so we challenge them, and I attack the goblins. This goblin kicks my ass. And I'm like, why? This thing straight up beat my ass. Like, it had an AC of just an insane AC. It was like, you know, in this case, high numbers are really good. So it was like 23. It had like twice the hit points I had. It actually had these powers that could shift it away from a guaranteed hit. Like if I hit it, it goes, immediate reaction, I move, I don't get hit. You know, so I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And he goes, Lord Cat's like, oh, that was a challenge rating 4 goblin. I'm like, oh, what now? And he's like, yeah, it's challenge rating 4, I thought you could take it. I'm like, no, because I'm challenge rating 1. And here's the problem. You see a goblin, and you immediately associate that with kobolds, like you can just pump them and their heads fly off. You know, that used to be. In AD&D, that was a goblin. Goblins had like 3 hit points, and they were made to be mowed down, because they were like minions. You know, they were the kind of guys you cut down to get to the bad guy. That was the sort of thing. So that's why, like, there's games like Steve Jackson, I think, do Kobolds Ate My Baby, where like anything kills you. You know, that's the running joke is kobolds. Now kobolds are like an encounter that goes all the way to level 13. Kobolds are a persistent threat all the way up there, and it's really weird. So like, you know, I'm this 1st level fighter, and even for a 1st level fighter, a goblin is a fair fight, but it shouldn't be like a straight up ass whooping. So like, I'm looking at this game, I opened the Monster Manual because I'm like, there's got to be some argument here. There's got to be some explanation for this, why this challenge rating 4 dude was like dominant. It's because they don't want monsters to just like disappear when you get to certain levels. They don't want it to be like obsolete. But at the same time, there's no way for a guy to look at a goblin and go, oh, that's a challenge rating 7 goblin. Because they all look alike. There's no way for me to look at a goblin, one or the other, and go, oh, that's a minion. Because with every encounter I played in D&D 4th, when I said, okay, here's an example. Let's say I'm facing the Goblin Chieftain, or I'm throwing the Goblin Chieftain at the party, and I say, the Goblin Chieftain orders his 40 goblins to charge the party. 40. Now, your immediate reaction is like, oh shit, we gotta run. Here's the thing, like your wizard could just like, they're all dead. Because they got 1 hit point. But you're immediately, like, it's this weird knee-jerk reaction to where you're like, oh my god, even if like 40 of these guys are eventually going to wear us down, it's this kind of absurd thing. And it really damaged the game, I thought, where like, it just, there's balance, and then there's like really ridiculous, there's no way to gauge the challenge of an encounter. For instance, another for instance was, sometimes when you're a DM, you want to make sure the party kind of does what you want sometimes. Like they have like, let's say you really want, for the purposes of the storyline, some corrupt lord of a city to imprison the party. Now that's really hard to do because they're going to fight any encounter you throw at them. You could be like, there's 12 guards, and they say, you're under arrest. Their reactions are like, let's fight this out. But you don't want that to happen. So you have to overwhelm them. You have to be like, there are literally 50 guys on the rooftops with locked heavy crossbows pointing in your direction. Like there has to be no unclear way to say, like, if you move, you die. You know. By the way, that's one of the worst things. Like, the concept of hit points is actually kind of destructive to games because let's say I throw a character up against a wall with a knife at his throat, and I'm like, if you move, you die. It's kind of a metagame thing to say, like, well, a knife only does 4 hit points. I'm fine. So, you know, there's kind of like this weird logic to D&D where hit points don't always equal harm. And that was even weirder. You ever play the Star Wars RPGs? Yeah. Especially the new ones? They do this thing called, like, vitality and health. And vitality is this kind of abstract concept of, I don't know what. It's like this abstract... It's an abstract concept of plot convenience. Where, like, you can't die until your vitality is gone, or whatever it is. So, like, you'll do this thing where some guy opens fire with a heavy blaster, and I go, it hits you for 8 hit points, but it doesn't really. So, like, it was only when your vitality was gone you start taking hit points that you were really in trouble. It was just weird, because I'm like, how do you explain this in terms of story? Like, he doesn't shoot you because it doesn't reach your hit points. It was this weird thing, and so I forgot where I was going with this. Hit points. So now, like, so I'm going back to AD&D here. So you had this great game where goblins were goblins, wyverns were wyverns, and you, like, if you messed with a beholder, that was fucking huge. Now you've got this thing where there's like a level, like the lowest thing is like a challenge rating for a beholder, but it looks like a fucking beholder, you know. And so like now when you see a beholder or you see a goblin, you go like, I don't know. It's kind of this weird. If you're trained, you get a +5. If not, nothing. So your skills very gradually increase, but it's not to the point where like even routine tasks are a certain thing. That's why I really love that. Now, AD&D is completely unbalanced. I don't even know if you played it. Has anyone ever played AD&D? Yeah. That old dude with the beard over there. Not you. Right. It's like one guy. But here's the thing. Balance is so huge in any game now. Like, you hear people bitching about it in video games. Like, if there's an unbalanced Street Fighter character, they're like, it's fucking unbalanced! I hate this game. I don't want to play it anymore. That's the big thing in Marvel vs. Capcom now. Team Trenchcoat. How many times have you played Team Trenchcoat? You know who that is? What is it? It's Wesker, Dante, and Virgil. Every fucking person you play on Marvel, Wesker, Dante, and every
Jam session.
What's jam session?
Dante's jam session move.
Oh yeah. So, like, because they're the best characters, and so like some games don't even pretend to have balance. Super Smash Brothers. Isn't that weird? Super Smash Brothers. Like, people take this game seriously, like really seriously, like tournament seriously. And so there's like this, I looked this up, there's like this list of tournament rules, for Super Smash Brothers, all the stuff you're not allowed to use, all the stages you're not allowed to use, like you take out half the game. Or like you can't choose Meta Knight because he's obviously broken. You can't choose stages. You can't do items. That's always the thing that pissed me off about it. Like, you can't use items. That's what fire flowers mean. You can't play a tournament where there's random trips introduced. You fall down for no reason, and basically the knockout condition is essentially random. But yeah, so balance was this big issue. But that was the beautiful thing about it. Was like, okay, let's just go to the example Lord of the Rings. You're watching Lord of the Rings, and you've got your halfling thieves and Gandalf. Now, obviously, they're like a different level. But it's like, no, let's just roll with this example here for a second. This isn't like all of a sudden, these guys basically do equal stuff, and that's just kind of weird for me, So like your first level thief can basically do an equal amount of damage as your wizard. Now they have different roles, obviously, so your cleric is going to be kind of your healer and stuff like that. But it was this kind of weird equality that kind of rang false. Whereas when in first level, if you're a fighter, you're at a real advantage because you're born this big burly dude, and anyone can swing a sword. So you've got a lot more hit points, you swing a sword, and do a lot more damage than your first level wizard, whose only thing is, how many spells a first level wizard got in AD&D? One! And when you were done with that, you were done. The only way you got a second spell was if you were a specialty wizard. You got 2. And that was huge! So everyone did a specialty wizard. So you had double the spells, which was everyone ever who played a wizard took sleep because that was the best spell, and that was your one spell. And you're like, I put this room to sleep, I'm done. And you walked. You were like, I'm done. You just sat back there with a sling and you threw rocks at people, and you're like, please protect me, Ranger, please. But that was the good thing about it, because you don't expect a first level wizard to be this guy who throws an absurd. They don't have at-will powers. In fourth edition AD&D, you have an at-will power where you're you can throw magic missiles indefinitely, and it's just weird to me where you have this unlimited power. So it was just weird. Okay, so here's the thing: as fighters leveled up, they got bigger, they got stronger, they got better with a sword, but wizards would pass them because they learned better magic, right? So all of a sudden, when you got to 6th level, the game started shifting a little bit. When you got to 6th level, you could cast 3rd level spells, and that meant you could cast Fireball, which meant you could clear runes. And then people started taking your ass seriously, right? Because you could start turning people to stone, and nobody enjoyed that. You could start throwing spells that charm people's minds, and fighters really didn't like that. There was this. It was kind of this weird series of curves, and it still made sense because your wizard got better, and all of a sudden he could start doing more stuff. So Gandalf. Let's just say Aragorn and Gandalf the Grey were equal level. They're not, but let's just say they're on a relatively equal plane here. Aragorn runs into a room, he takes one guy out at a time. Gandalf, when he gets mad, and you don't really see him do this in the movies, but you imagine Gandalf can throw some pretty serious pain out if he wanted to. So that's the difference, where you got a really badass series of dudes, but Aragorn is kind of limited to what he can do as a fighter. And then you had Gandalf as a wizard. When you meet a 15th level wizard, you're careful around this dude. You're real careful. When it comes to a fighter, as long as you don't make him mad and you stay away from him, he can't reach you, really, And that was the kind of the fundamental thing where I was is balance always this, is it always a good thing? And I don't think it is. Because that was really what I took away from AD&D to 4th, was all of a sudden this whole game became homogenized. I'm talking down AD&D, and that's the next thing when I run a 4th edition game. No, but it's the way it starts off is fine. But it kind of becomes this really tiresome exercise of, at no point do these characters ever leave this balanced state. And they're really worried about that. And I'm actually very curious to see D&D Next, which is the 5th edition. They don't want to call it 5th edition for some reason. They want to add this buzzword where it's it's next. And although another thing that was weird about that was they almost seemed like they didn't have any ideas for this one. We should do another edition. And then they started crowdsourcing. Did you hear about this? Where they started putting on their site, why don't you guys suggest some rules? Because we got nothing.
Joe, our jobs for us.
Like we don't know what you want. Like nobody's like. Although I thought people were really playing 4th edition. That was one of the best things 4th edition did. Was it was really newbie friendly because it all made sense. And also they did this seriously huge campaign called Encounters, which was like hour-long campaigns that anyone could go to at a store. And you could drop in and out of these games. It was basically like one fight a session. Really cool. So like if you wanted to teach someone how to do it, or you didn't know and you wanted to find out if you liked it, that was a really great way to do it. So it was way more accessible. But here's the funny thing about 4th edition. I did this review. I did like a vlog of it where I was flipping through the books and I was like, this is really remarkably balanced. I kind of like this. Just wait till they fuck it up. And I called it because here's the thing. You ever play Rifts? You know what Rifts is? Rifts is this really weird game where the basic story is one day on Earth, all of a sudden just everything broke. Where like reality just kind of shattered, and all of a sudden these things called ley lines started appearing, which is like the inner magic of the world. Like, you know how Sephiroth wanted to reach the glowing life force of the Earth? That's what it is. So these ley lines are like dimensional rifts, and they go to like every dimension. So you don't want to step in one. But things are stepping out of them all the time, like seemingly at random. Some really weird shit is going on. So like literally Thor will like walk out one portal. They're called godlings. So like these things like from the Q continuum will just walk out. Like a Pikachu is no, you can make a Pikachu in Rifts. Like if you want to play a Pikachu, you can find something close to that. A Pikachu will walk out. And, like everything, it's so random. And so here's the thing: every single thing you're likely to play has an OCC. It's an occupational character class, something like that. So the core book has this really bizarre series of completely unbalanced OCCs. Not that they were ever trying. So like I joined this Rifts game and they're like, what do you want to play? I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, explain the story to me. And so they're like, it's like post-apocalyptic, reality rifts, things are stepping out. And I'm like, okay, I want to make like a streetwise character. Like I want to be like kind of a skill-based dude who really knows the streets and knows what he's doing. And the guy running the game, he didn't like warn me or anything. He was just like, okay, here's a city rat. The city rat OCC. And I'm like, cool, I can use computers, I can like hack a vending machine. The other guy in the party, Dragon Juicer. Okay, you guys are completely lost on this one. Here's what a Dragon Juicer is. He is the Incredible Hulk, literally on steroids. There's a juicer, there's a Dragon Juicer, and I think they even have like a Demon Juicer. What they do is, the normal juicer is basically Bane from the comics. Like he's got venom and it jacks him up to an absurd degree. And he is so muscle bound he has what's called mega damage, which sounds badass, but like basically you had this, there's normal damage and then there's mega damage. So like if I shot the juicer with a handgun, it would do nothing. Literally nothing. It would you have to use what's called a mega damage gun, which does, like, I think 1,000 times, I think that's the rate, it's either like 100 or 1,000 times what a normal gun would do. So, like, you shoot, like, a laser pistol, which does, like, if you were to shoot my city rat, who had no MDC armor, my guy was just a normal guy, like a computer hack sword. If you were to shoot me with a normal gun, I would be hurt. If you shot me with a laser gun, I would evaporate. Well, what happened to Joe? And he's like, So that was also what's broken is they actually did a crossover. They did Robotech. They crossed over with Rifts, the Robotech anime. Here's the thing though, the Veritech fighters didn't have MDC. So like my lace, I'll be like, there goes Rick. It was fucking unbelievable. So like, nothing is balanced. And so what happens is, to accommodate this everything in the kitchen sink concept, there are hundreds of OCCs. And like every time they put out a book, like they do New Atlantis or the Tolkien world, and so like every book was just like, it was like you could fill a room with the splat books for this game, right? So like every one of them had like 40 OCCs, and so it was this really strange game where you'd have people collecting every single book, and they'd have like this option of literally like thousands of OCCs, and every time you started a Rifts game, you had to do this thing where like you almost had to do like a Smash Brothers thing, where you had to like explicitly pick what books were in and what books were out. So the first time, they actually kind of taught me into running a Rifts game, and I didn't know shit. But I read the first book and I was like, I can make this work. Oh, I need to finish the Juicer story. There's the normal Juicer who's like Bane, okay, and he's so muscle bound, he's like immune. And you get like that's all they do is they're like, I need more drugs. So that's your really bizarre type of characters where like you have these really serious drug addicts, but venom is really rare, and so they're like we need to hunt dragons, and my city rat is like, what? I have a laptop. So then there's demon juicers. I can't remember if there's demon. There must have been, because there was like something over demon juicers. But we had this fucking dragon juicer who, like, if he farted on me, my dude would just he'd fly apart, actually. Be like one of the vampires from Blade, just ash. My biggest mistake, though, when I ran my Rifts campaign was this guy I knew named Dan. He's one of those guys where you really learn a lot about people sometimes when you roleplay with them. Like, they're perfectly normal, and then you see a side of them when they roleplay that is really scary. Okay, tangent. Vampire the Masquerade. He goes, can we play Sabat? Which, there's two classes. There's the Camarilla, which are essentially the good guys. No, not really. And then there's the Sabat, who are like these bloodthirsty maniacs. They're like the stereotypical bad guys of the thing, because they hit people with shovels. And so I go, he's the kind of guy who doesn't like being told no, and if you tell him no, he rebels. So I go, you gotta play a Camarilla guy. And he goes, oh, I will. So he plays this guy who, he's Camarilla, and he does this thing where he goes, he chooses his demeanor and nature and stuff like that. He chooses like monster aberrant. And so he does this thing where he's got selective feeding, where he's a vampire, and so he only chooses one specific target, and of course he chooses children. Not only that, he's like, my occupation is I'm a guidance counselor at an elementary school. So I lure children into my office and I feed on them. And then I ghoul them. A ghoul is when you feed to someone the vampire's blood, and they become a loyal servant because they're dependent on your blood. Yeah. So all of a sudden he has this elementary school full of like children that he sucks on. And I'm looking at Dan as he explains this. Okay. Yeah. So Dan was like, I said, like, I'm running Rifts, and he goes, what books are allowed? Dumbass that I am. I go, any book. He goes home, and this is how I picture it. Like, he goes home, and he pushes a bookshelf aside. There's like a vault door, and he's like, it opens up, smoke rolls out, and he's got like this, like the fucking like Library of Congress, and he's like, I can't even remember what he picked, but he's like, I'm a godling, and I'm like, what's that? He's like, you know Zeus? Like that. So like, he literally has this, like, he has this power, like, he can just unmake reality. So like, if I say anything, like, oh, this guy, it's gone. There's actually this really famous adventure he wanted to run where you fight the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And it's like, what happens is out of the Rifts come the literal 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And they're like way worse than you think they are. Like they're the size of Godzilla, and they're riding huge fucking horses, and they're like stampeding countries. So like they're all running amok around the world, and that's like this adventure. It's one of those things where like no matter how broken Rifts is, these horsemen will screw you up. It was like Emerald Weapon from Final Fantasy VII, where like that was the big thing. And so like he wanted the challenge, and this is the guy who the fights took like 3 hours to kill one of them. You know, these things are friggin' invulnerable. That was crazy. And so, back to my original tangent. That was what I was afraid of with 4th edition. I was like, every book they were putting out, they introduced like 5 new classes. And sure enough, I was like, they're going to do OCCs again. I just know they will. And they did. So like all of a sudden you had these weird classes coming out that weren't anywhere near as balanced as the first one. So like the biggest mistake was, have you heard of the vampire? Yeah. Okay. For those of you who don't know, they made vampire. It might not be called vampire. It might have been called like bloodsucker, like vampire or something like that. Yeah. So like that became a selectable race, like elf, dwarf, halfling, vampire. They wanted to make it where it was a playable character, like like if you played Skyrim, you wanted to play as a vampire for a little while, So like, honestly, I thought that wasn't a bad idea, except that you explode if it's daytime. That kind of limits your adventure, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can't go out ever. So like, you step in, what time is it? You got to walk out of the dungeon. Oh shit, I forgot it was noon. But what they did was, I can't remember which one I liked. There was one. But what they did was in another book, or it might have been the same book. I thought it was probably another book. They had vampire as a class. It was a character class. So you could literally do this thing where your race was vampire and your class was vampire. So the class, like the race vampire was just like, you're a vampire. The class vampire was kind of like this thing where there's normal vampires, and then there's kind of Count Dracula, who's kind of like this aristocratic type dude who has this power of personality that he can kind of twist your mind and do these things where like he does claws and he can turn into a bat, and those are his powers. It was just really weird how that was like a running joke forever. It was like, I'm going to make a vampire. It's going to be fucking awesome. And then you could do things like have elf vampires and stuff like it was. I almost guarantee you they didn't check with each other. It was like 2 departments where like one guy was working on the race vampire, one guy was working on the class vampire, and they just published. And they look at each other like, you bastards. So, what time did I was rambling on? What time is it? 10 too? So, with the, I'll wrap up by saying like, AD&D is still obviously my favorite. I would still play AD&D. Actually, I have something else. I'll show it to you guys. There's this game that was released by, I used to work for these guys, Kenzer & Company. It's called Hackmaster. And what that was basically a re-release of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. So much so that they basically licensed AD&D somehow. And then they kind of put their own spin on it. So there's a really good comic book called Knights of the Dinner Table, which all it is, it's a comic book that deals exclusively with 5 people, there's the DM and 4 players, who just have really funny D&D stories, and it's basically like real life D&D. It's basically like Counter Monkey the comic book, to where you've got, it's way funnier than it sounds. I'm not making it sound very good, but it's like, there's this one thing where like the DM says, okay, you enter this garden, and it's all this, you enter this garden, and there's a large gazebo in the center, and they freak out. They're like, what the fuck is that? A gazebo? And the rules player is like, I know what a gazebo is. They're badass. We better not mess with it. And so like, the DM's trying to get a word in edgewise, and the fighter's like, I can take this thing. And he's like, I attack the gazebo with my sword. And the DM's like, you do no appreciable damage to it. And they're like, oh shit. It must have like magic resistance or something like that. So the mage is like, I throw a fireball at it.
Or a flask of acid.
And they go like, it's like made of wood. So he's like, oh, the fire, you set the gazebo on fire, and it crumbles to the ground. I'm like, yes! So that's the sort of thing. It's like all D&D stories. It just goes on like that. And in fact, they've expanded so much where they have like 3 different groups now. So like one is like a really munchkin-y group, and there's another one that's like all ladies. Because that was just... I actually wrote a screenplay for a while. It was really, really bad. Called FLGS, which is Friendly Local Game Store. Actually, if you ask the men in black out there, they'll know what it is. But this was like my first idea for Counter Monkey years and years and years ago. Where when I worked at the store many moons ago, women never played D&D ever. Like there were no women gamers. This is a relatively new phenomenon. Even like women who like anime, that never happened. This was something that happened. I almost say like, it occurred 1 in a million. Like 1 in 1,000. And I felt so sorry for those ladies because like every nerd everywhere would hit on them. It was really sad because nerds who hang out in a game store have no fucking game at all. We'd almost throw up on them. They're like, "What do you like to play?" I play Magic. Do you like Magic? And they're like, "No, I play." They almost all play World of Darkness, by the way, because it attracted the goths. This is really stereotypical. I'm being here, but like a lot of women were kind of drawn to the vampire thing. Go figure that one. They're like, I want someone dark and mysterious who's like very brooding and controlling and who sucks on me occasionally. that was what I encountered. I'm sure that I think where it really turned around was kind of like Buffy. Like when Buffy hit, that was when all of a sudden it was okay to be nerdy. You know, for women, I think women kind of universally was like, wow, it's okay to like nerdy things. And it was like a big, like Joss Whedon kind of had this big coming out party for all the female nerds. And I know I'm going to get flack from this. So like you're like, no. But yeah, you know, when you know, like everyone liked Firefly. You know, that was like, it wasn't bad anymore, like something really nerdy, because all of a sudden it was really weird, like women were watching this show about spaceships. That never happened. Like women never watched Star Trek back in the day, you know. So like, and I'm not exaggerating when I say when I worked in the game store, you never saw a woman. It was like being in prison. The only women we ever saw were like mid-50s who were buying Pokemon cards for their kids. That was it. Like, and they didn't know anything about games, so they're like, my son likes to play the Pokemons. What are good Pokemons to have? So like I give them a starter deck. I like go. But that was it, and we weren't really lusting after the moms, you know. So it was just so weird. Like there was one female gamer who came in, and she like fucking vultures, we descended. It's like being a really hot cosplayer at San Diego Comic-Con. You know, like you get hit on like crazy. What's really creepy is they follow you. Like I've been followed one time at a con because I'm sexy that way. But like I really feel bad for something like now I'm sounding like a rapist.